All right, I would like to officially welcome you to our program for the Hoffman Estates Museum, and I am the historian for the village. And we always have special programs to celebrate the 59th anniversary, or our anniversary each year, of incorporation. Our village was incorporated on the 23rd of September, and that will be tomorrow. So today we're celebrating that 59 years. And so we will start into our 60th year. So we're very pleased to have special guests to present a program entitled The History of Surveying and Interesting Local Projects. So I would like to introduce you to, this is Tanya Smith, and this is Don Smith. And they are from the surveying firm of Greeley-Howard-Norlin-Smith. And it was founded in Chicago in 1854. And they have wonderful stories to tell you. And they brought wonderful instruments, very old instruments from the very beginning of surveying here in the Chicagoland area. The maps, I love maps. And so I hope you enjoy looking at them. They have gloves and they will turn pages for you. And some of the books are very, very old, so we want to make sure that you don't touch them. There are little markers in the books that Tanya has put there, and so if you look in a book, you might want to look at all those little flagged pages because she said they represented information about our local area. So we're very pleased to have them. They are looking for a wonderful home for all of the documents that they have. It's got to a point where there's no more room. And so, Tanya, what did you say it would cost for someone to be able to purchase and store these in their own surveying museum?
I don't know how much. I honestly don't know how much it will cost to preserve and store it. I know that we want to sell it, and we appraised parts of our collections, or different collections of our archives. We have some prices. I would rather not announce them right now, but if anybody is interested, please call me. I want to start saying that my husband, Donald Smith, is the 5th generation of land surveyors in his family. I was married into interesting family because everybody, since about junior high school, we forced our children to help us, and before Donald was helping his father with his 2 brothers even from earlier age. In fact, at the age of 9, he was helping his father with the construction of Prudential building in downtown Chicago, which was a big deal at that time because there was no skyscrapers built for quite a while before construction of Prudential building.
Actually, I was 12.
12? For some reason I thought you were 9. Okay, sorry.
3 years experience of that.
How it happened with Prudential building that his father sent a field crew and they stayed for excavation, for construction, and then the contractor called next day that your surveyor stayed wrong. So his father wanted to go and check those stakes, but he didn't want to go on Friday because when equipment works there, then the instrument shakes and it doesn't show the accurate reading. So he wanted to go on Saturday. And he wanted to take his older son, who was older than Don. But Charlie was busy with softball or something. So he took Don. And Don was too short to see into the instrument. So they put a box for him to stand where the instrument was. And it just happened that one of the correspondents of a local newspaper was walking by. And he saw this cute picture where a little boy is standing and looking into surveying instrument, and his father climbed into the hole that excavation they already started with a second part of the tool, and Don was reading some measurements. So that correspondent then talked to them about this, and there was a little article in the local newspaper. So that's how we know that this is a fact. Otherwise, like how much we believe in family legends. We have quite few legends that we never believed until we found, for example, some drawings that are connected to the legal practice of Abraham Lincoln. After that, we believe all of the legends that his parents ever told us. We found 2 packages of drawings that each one of them is clearly marked. If you can see on the very top right there, it says, first is the case number, which is 219, and then page 304, and then Bates versus Illinois Central Railroad Company. So we knew that these were used as exhibits in some court cases. And when we did research, we found out that my husband's great-great-great-uncle, Samuel Gridley, who started this business in 1854, he was hired as expert witness in these 2 land disputes. And Abraham Lincoln, in this case, he was representing Illinois Central Railroad Company, and in the other case, Lincoln was representing just a private party that was between 2 landowners. The land was right by the Navy Piers on the shore of Lake Michigan. When they built Navy Piers, some land disappeared, and then some land appeared like next to it by accretion, and people wanted to get that land added to their original deeds. And that's where the dispute was. And the land in downtown Chicago was expensive even back then. Abraham Lincoln was involved in these 2 cases at the time of appeal on each one of them. Both of these cases went through U.S. Supreme Court. In fact, Johnston versus Jones went through U.S. Supreme Court twice. They were in different courts for many years, many times, and finally ended. One case was for the plaintiff, and one case was against plaintiff, finally ruled. And I don't know if people ran out of money paying for all of the court hearings, but finally they accepted the ruling. With Johnston versus Jones, Lincoln was invited by a law firm in Chicago. We have copies of letters that they sent to him. Abraham Lincoln was a surveyor before he was a lawyer, before he was a president. Not everybody knows that. So this law firm in Chicago, they invite him to come and participate in this case because not only he had big experience in different conflict cases, but because he was a surveyor, so he could explain all of these surveys clearly to the court. This was appealed to Illinois Northern District Court, something, I don't remember exactly the name. I heard it someplace. And Lincoln agreed, even so it was right at the beginning of his presidential campaign before election. So they finished that court. It was ruled in favor of the party that Lincoln was participating, and then he went campaigning, and then the other party appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, so he wasn't participating in that case, but this law firm was. He was participating in each of these cases only in one hearing. Nevertheless, we have these maps. We went with them to Springfield, to President Lincoln's Presidential Library and Museum. Of course they want it. We cannot donate, we don't have that much income to deduct. We hope to find a sponsor or a group of sponsors who will help us to place it with some of the museums. There are lots of interesting museums. Unfortunately, museums, all non-for-profit, are suffering. Economy still did not recover since this last recession of 2008-2009. So that's that. Donald can explain more about general division of the land in the United States and in the state. I can tell you about the history of the company. So I think that talking a little bit more about division of the land in general maybe should come first before the history of the company, because that is like more general information.
So we discussed the range line and how it was divided up and broken off and monumented. These are the township lines. If you're familiar with the legal description on your subdivision plat or legal, it's going to say section 20 or 17, township 41 north, range 10 east. This is the principal meridian down in Centralia. So you're so many lines over from the principal. You also have west of the principal meridian. So this is how, in answer to your question, this is how we get started. Your subdivision is in section 17, township 40 north, range 10 east, and that's where your subdivision is. Section 17 then was divided up with corners at the quarter corners, so that the government could sell off. Their preference was a whole 160 acres. But that wasn't going over well with the sales. So at that point, the state had been incorporated, and the state surveyors divided it again into quarters. So you ended up with a 40 acre. And that's what most subdivisions are developed from, a 40 acre tract. So to figure out where your lot corner is, you had to figure out where the actual subdivision was with reference to section 17, township 40, range 10, 40 lot, whatever. And then the individual lots are all divided up. So you had to make sure that those lots were monumented properly to come up with the answer to your question as to where your property line is. Simple, right? Any other questions? Nobody? Everybody knows what a surveyor does? Yes?
No, I just have a question about what if you remove those monuments? If there were on your property, is there a
Actually, it's against the law.
yes. So
It is against the law to remove a surveyor's marker,
Okay, and you could go to jail, perhaps, or be fined.
if you found the right judge.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, it's an ongoing problem for surveyors. Gardeners, they find this iron in the ground, they say, oh, what's this? Yank it. Even back early in 1900s, because of the iron shortage with the war, they used wood stakes. So who's going to think a wood stake is important?
Just one more thing. The reason I asked, we have property in northern Wisconsin, and the surveyor monuments are simply a wooden stake, and the top of it is painted red. And so they're marked in the front of the property, we can see this clearly. To the back of the property, they're lost somewhere in the woods. But my grandson took one of those out.
Metal stakes are in the ground completely. And
Those red tops are actually just marking
oh,
the point where the iron is.
So
we
need to
put them
look for
like
that.
this deep
Yeah.
under the top of the ground, so then they don't get pushed with the frost, and they don't interfere, cutting grass. They don't break your lawnmower or shoot someplace and break the window in the house. So they are totally in the ground. When we go to do a survey, I'm sorry I'm encroaching on Don's topic, we look for the corners. We measure with the tape approximately, and we look with metal detector. If we can find the old stakes, that will make our life easier, and we can provide better price. And we have a lot of old surveys. That's why our archive is so huge, because we keep every survey that ever was done. And probably, I can tell you with like 99% of certainty, probably we measured every block in the city of Chicago over the years, because the city of Chicago was the most populated and needed the most survey.
To clarify that, she means that the predecessors of all the companies that we
Yes.
acquired
Yes.
have records over most of Chicago.
So like.
I haven't done that. Yes.
Speaking of Chicago, I've wandered around and I've seen them in the sidewalks and stuff, like the brass markings. I also see one like stuck to the side of a building, or like in a corner. I was trying to figure out how they're gonna work off of that.
No, that might have been a vertical,
Okay.
for vertical control.
Okay.
Although with the instruments today, we can shoot right to the face of the building and know the distance as well. In fact, we have an instrument set up there. I'll get to that a little later. I got the instrument set up more or less in the chronological order of design and use. So we started out with the compass. Then we're going to go to an instrument here, which is about 1890. It's a small instrument, small transit. And it's small because horseback riding, carrying across the swamps and whatever. So, and then plane table that they use to mark off the swamps, the logging area. It was their responsibility when they were doing the original government surveys to know what the land was being used and what minerals or what advantage, so that they could assess it properly in Washington to get the best price out of the people. So this plane table, it's an interesting thing. It's set actually on a drafting table, and then they would turn, read the angle to something, and then the stick here, similar sticks, they would read an upper level and a lower level, and then mathematically know the distance without actually measuring it. So it was very useful. But then the long level, that was mostly for railroads, because railroads wanted it nice and flat and even. And another instrument that they break it down into pieces for the same reason: horseback riding and what is the wagon? Conestoga wagons, and no roads. They had to make their roads to get to where they were going. So I mentioned this one, which is the one that created the vertical benchmarks. This one was a mining instrument used for mining coal and tunneling. And then we got to instruments with electronics. This is a laser, one of the first laser beams to measure distance.
What year is that approximately?
This one's probably about 1960.
Things.
This would mount on top of this equipment, a theodolite, which measures angles to 1 second, vertically and horizontally. And then you'd have the distance, angle, and vertical elevation. And then not the latest, but still in use, is the total station, which can measure by light. How far is it from this instrument to that thing over there in the corner? What's your estimate?
61.
Who said 51?
I said 61.
61. Here's how we do it today.
Press 2 buttons. That's it.
50 feet, 5 inches.
Yay! Someone was really close. Another addition to that instrument is this. This is data collector. So we hook this to that with a cord, and then all of these angles and distances is stored here. And then you bring it to the office and you hook it to computer and you transfer all of the information so that drafting people have all of the information.
We used to have to write down everything. Now it's all done digitally. So we can just transfer it and give it to the drafting department.
We still make sketches because even with all of these points, you still need to know how it looks.
It just aids the draftsman into knowing what points to use. The next step up now from this is GPS. You've probably seen them standing out there with a little unit on top of a pole. That's measuring the distance from the satellites, so that they know exactly where they are on the ground and they know exactly their elevation.
However, it doesn't work all over. Unfortunately, it doesn't work even in subdivisions. I'm not even talking about downtown Chicago. The satellite instrument needs to be able to communicate with 6 satellites on orbit. And skyscrapers, tall buildings, tall trees, it all interferes. So the best use when we plan new subdivisions, when we do plans and surveying support for new construction, when someone buys a cornfield and there is almost no trees, then it works like that. Otherwise, it doesn't work in every environment. That's why we still use this. This is much simpler, but it's good old working course.
Do you have access to more accurate GPS, meaning like, I know like civilian, you have 5 or 3 to 6 feet or something like that, is what we can get? So you have access to like a different system or whatever?
Yeah, it's 7 US satellites and 12 Russian satellites that we can all measure right to within 1/8 of an inch.
I think we're shooting 30 something, but all we need is
30 feet,
3.
yeah,
And if we see 3, we can get triangulated and get within 6 feet or something like that.
yeah. We get within 1/8 of an inch.
The accuracy for surveys to 2/100 of an inch.
The problem is that GPS is just a tool. If you don't know what to use it for and how to use it, you come up with bad answers. The old adage, garbage in, garbage out. So it's just like any of these instruments, it's a tool. I can come up with just as accurate of a survey with a measure tape. I don't think we brought one, do we? Just the typical measure tape, as I can with the total station or with GPS. It's just how you go about it and what you develop off of.
How do you measure the lane that you're buying if, let's say it's a big hill? They go 200 feet up or figure on whether it would be to the slash?
Where's the collector?
I look at that.
When we collect the points, it's all at the same level. Even if it's a hill or whatever. The elevation gives a point, but the measurement is horizontal.
It's theoretical. Consider that as being flat even though it's not flat.
Yes.
In other words, you're buying a piece of land
Yes.
that goes 600 feet up, but it's bigger maybe as 200 feet because it's across.
We just did a job a couple months ago in Delanco. Delanco in Highland Park has lots of ravines. It was fun. Don did original survey in like 60s. And we had to update it. So lots of climbing.
If that's your terrain and your instruments here, there's the stick. It measures the angle down, but the distance is calculated perpendicular. So no matter where the instrument collection is, it's measuring horizontal for distance. It does give the vertical distance, gives the vertical angle, and it gives you an angle from your other point. So everything's recorded. Any other question? Oh, come on. Yes?
On your plot survey where you have the numbers on the board there, why does it start off in the number 1 on the upper right side versus going left to right?
That is the way Mr. Jefferson told us to do it. And they're all the same throughout the entire country, whether you go to Texas or wherever in the U.S., it's all measured and numbered the same way.
So when he's doing the stuff above ground, and I was watching this thing, tunneling, Nova, they're tunneling it, so you dig a hole, you get your big boring machine, and then, the guys come from both ends and they're off by, a quarter of an inch. You ain't got hills and rocks.
Tell them about your deep
Yeah,
rock tunnel
Yeah,
project.
how do you,
He did 22 miles of deep rock tunnel.
how do you know where you're going?
In the dark.
And cold. There's your tunnel.
Yeah.
If you will, it goes down. Here's your baseline up at the surface. You can measure the angle down. You can measure the distance down. And then from the same point, you turn the same angle, you supplement to the angle, and you're on the same parallel line. So not only do you have left, right, forward, back, and vertical, you got left, right, forward, back, and vertical here. So you know where you are with respect to each other. And then it's just a question of turning the angle to get to where you want to be. Mathematics.
I'm sure you can figure it out pretty good, but you get down there, you hit the button, start drilling. But how do you keep course? You got just because of iron. How do you keep drifting? You got this big drill bit. So how do you keep them drifting as you're going, through your deep tunnel? Your course, I guess.
basically, we would set points,
Okay.
just what's similar to that. We'd set points for the people, the engineers, to come with the equipment and drill. It was fun. I did enjoy that project.
And probably these days, these drill machines have some kind of GPS unit on them. It's like farmers now plow with tractors that have GPS so they can plow at night.
No, the big tunnel can't use it.
Musk is already has set up a company called the Boring Company, and they're looking at, already made plans to build a tunnel from downtown Chicago.
To O'Hare.
Yeah.
A couple thousand feet down.
Yeah,
It'll get you to O'Hare in about 5 minutes.
yeah.
Yes, we heard that.
But they already started plans for it.
There's a lot of plans. We'll just see how much the taxes go up to pay for it.
Well, no, this is private money.
Yeah, environment.
But no, they're saying the whole thing is going to be private.
I haven't heard that it's all private.
Yeah.
Yes,
How would you handle a lake or a river?
how do you mean?
Well, suppose you had a monument in the middle of the lake. How would you put it in there?
Wait for winter. You basically, what you're trying to ask is where's your property corner in the middle of the lake? If that's your lake, the surveyor would set up a point here, set up a point here, and then triangulate to get to the center. So he knows where it's at all the time, based upon the monument set on the bank. And that's just simply, again, trick.
If we cannot stake in the middle of the creek, we had a project like a month ago, and 3 property owners were in the middle of the creek. We set them on the bank, and we say on the plat, offset. Let's say this stake is 10 feet north of the property line or east, or, that kind of stuff.
Yes. Yes.
Well, when you were showing about the deep tunnel, how you triangulated items, that sort of explains, I remember years ago watching on TV when they built between England and France underwater, how they made it pinpoint from each location. So that explained how he did that.
Yeah.
Accomplished that.
You have to have very accurate locations, beginning and end, to be able to do in between. But it's just mathematics and work procedures. Yes.
There was, I'm assuming it was a monument. It was located on the second step up at an old school that was torn down. Would that have to be resurveyed too, because then it was all demolished? And this was the front steps going into the school. What would, that's gone. Would that have to have been marked in some way before that building was torn down?
If it were a government monument, yes, it should have been.
It was right in the steps, on concrete steps.
The county of Cook used to hire surveyors to come out to any road construction, find the monuments, and then replace the monuments. These days, Cook County uses the highway people.
But I'm wondering if
And
that...
I have found the brass plugs that they theoretically replaced as much as 35 feet in the wrong spot. So,
Yes. Well, I
Not
don't
surprising.
know what happened to that, when you talk about, they shouldn't be removed, and I'm thinking, well, then you replace it.
yeah.
And
The procedure is whenever a government monument is found, you're supposed to notify a surveying company to come out and locate it and reestablish it in the same spot.
some questions.
But
Yes.
that happens how often?
Yeah.
Yes.
Does it say on this US government, I mean, how does somebody know that? Does it-
Yes, most government brass plates have the whole stamp on it. US whatever, elevation, whatever, and identification number, so that you can use it actually for elevation as well as position. Yeah.
Where do you see your profession going in the future? I mean, will you be
That's why I'm retiring.
like surveying the moon, surveying the mining asteroids, or who knows, what's going to go, what's going to happen?
Surveying is always the same thing, just technology's different, terrain's different, but yes, we'll probably be dividing up the moon at some point. I mean, there's countries now that are landing on the moon, so it's going to be an issue, but.
I think you guys got like top security. Everybody's chopping up some land or redoing stuff.
Yes, we think that land surveying probably never will be outsourced. Some villages were trying to request from the surveyors to provide GPS coordinates, and they wanted to create like entire map of the entire village, and they thought that that will be forever and we don't have to request any of the surveys. Doesn't work.
So they're trying to Googleize everything.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah, coordinate is good as long as you know you got the coordinate of what. Getting back to the question about where's my property line,
Yeah, I mean, I got my flat survey, and I was out there in the yard trying to get, with my little measuring tape, trying to coordinate my little corner of the room.
Or if there is no more questions about this topic, I might tell you a little bit about the history of our business.
In the end, or kids don't know this school? You said you're retiring, you're staying in the business.
it's been a family tradition to pass it on. I'm lucky to have 2 girls of my own and 2 girls with Tanya, and nobody wants the business, so. I'll be another dinosaur gone, and where surveying goes from here, I guess it goes.
So, my husband's uncle, Samuel Greeley, he came from Boston to Chicago. He graduated Harvard University. I would say that from all of the surveyors that either we have records that were purchased or came to our company through partnerships, or as I said, we just purchased from a estate of some surveyor that passed away or was retiring. We don't buy everybody. We know who's good surveyor and who's not so. All the surveyors were really well educated, especially back in the day. So he graduated Harvard University, and he got his first job as the rodman, holding stick like that, on construction of water main for the city of Boston. And the supervisor was Mr. Chesborough. I believe his name was Eli or Elijah. And he worked there, and then he learned more, and he became instrument person. After that project was finished, I think like maybe 6 months after that project was finished, Mr. Chesborough was invited by the city councils of the city of Chicago to come to Chicago and help to conquer the sewer problem, because there was no sewer system in Chicago. We're talking about 1840s. And he came here and he studied, and then he had a proposal to the city council that the city need to be raised, because the city of Chicago is built on a flat land. And they didn't accept his proposition. However, they sent him to Europe to to go to London, Paris, and Berlin and see how the sewer systems were built there, and then come back. He went abroad. He was there for almost a year. He came back and gave them the same proposition, but with more supporting evidence. And then they agreed. And you might know that the city of Chicago was actually raised. Not all of the buildings, but most of the buildings were actually raised to level them with the new streets. There are a few areas in Chicago where homeowners didn't have money to do that. So little village neighborhood, like around Sormak, there are some homes that the street is higher than the first floor of the house. So let's say like this, okay? So the walkway and new door goes to the former second floor of the building, but you can see the first floor, they have like patio there, like walk-out basement now. And then the other area where lots of buildings like that as well is Hedgewich, which is far east, southeast part of Chicago, where there are lots of buildings like that. I did a lot of research about the history of our company, about people who were involved with this business over the 163 years. Also, I did research on people who created all of the atlases that we have. We have 186 different atlases in our possession. Not only Cook County, not only the state of Illinois, there are some atlases from other parts of other states. So we were curious who prepared them and who were those people. Lots of these atlases, besides the person who created the atlas or published, there are also old stamps or signatures like property of, and lots of real estate agents, lots of mortgage people, loan people back in the day, developers. They bought these atlases because they wanted to know what they're going to be selling or giving money for mortgage. So it's interesting to follow all of this. The only reason why we actually had time to do all of this research because this recession hit. Otherwise we work every day and we never had time, honestly, to look through all of the old cabinets and old boxes and see what we have. We still didn't check every cabinet, every drawer, every box. We did research on lots of things. I have compiled lists of surveyors with biographical information and stuff. We have lots of stuff on our website. If you will be interested, you can find by just Googling Donald Smith Land Surveyor, you will get to our website. It's easier than to remember the complicated name of the business. The business was started by Samuel Greeley. Oh, sorry, I wiggled aside. So when Mr. Chesborough got his plan approved to raise the city of Chicago, he invited some of the engineers and land surveyors who were working with him in Boston because he knew that they understand what they are doing. That's how Mr. Greeley came to Chicago. And then he was working on that project, and after that project was done, he decided to stay. He liked the city. So he established his own business that was officially registered in 1854. And then, only a few years after that, he was hired as expert witness to work into land disputes where Abraham Lincoln was working as an attorney. In one case for Illinois Central Railroad Company, in one case for Johnston, and it was Johnston versus Jones. And the first case was Bates versus Illinois Central Railroad Company. Samuel Greeley did lots of interesting projects. I did a lot of research about him. When he retired, His son continued, Frederick, and then his grandson, Morris, and Earl Smith, my late father-in-law, how he came into picture. My late mother-in-law, Lucille, she was related to the Gridley family, and during the Great Recession, her side of the family was suffering financially. They were in Michigan, and she came to Chicago to work for her uncle in his land surveying business as a secretary because she needed money. And Earl Smith, who was already working as a surveyor for a different company, he came to their office to get some help with some difficult project. And back in the day, surveyors were helping each other. So he met Lucille, and he invited her on a date, and she didn't want to go with him first because his face was red, and she thought that he is drinking too much. But then later she talked to her aunt, to Gridley's wife, and she told her, no, you silly, he is a land surveyor, he works outside a year around, so his face is red for a different reason. And they started dating and got married and had 4 children. So that's how the Smith family came into picture. Earl Smith was born in the very southern Illinois, not too far from Carbondale. And he was a farm boy. He came to Chicago to work. He was the oldest of 12 children. He came to Chicago to work, and then over the years learned about land surveying and started working for a land surveying company and got licensed and became one of the good surveyors. And honestly, this is amazing to me because how now with high school education and college degree and still there's not so many intelligent people. Just education is poor, and it's like young adults, they don't have desire to learn something new. I'm sorry, I'm going into personal observations. Back in the day, even, let's say, President Lincoln, he self-educated himself too. He didn't have much of formal education. Same with our predecessor, Earl Smith. He had, I think, only 6 years of formal education back in the day in the farm country, and then learned so much on his own. Donald, at the age of 15, already knew so much about land surveying that he was working for his father in summer, full-time on payroll, teaching 2 grown-up men how to do surveying. So he was field group chief at the age of 15. Saved all his money, and after he graduated high school, went to Europe for 6 months. Yeah. Helped to build Sears Tower. Parts of Ravinia, they wanted to do a topographic survey to locate every tree because they wanted to figure out how they can build new building and cut the least trees. So every tree had to be located and described on the map. Parts of Botanical Garden, first condominium in Chicago, where he had to work with lawyers to make like a pattern for everybody else in the future to follow. How do you sell a condominium unit vertically and horizontally? And after that, 60,000 more condominium units, but that was the first one, right on Michigan Avenue. We did, as I said, we did some interesting projects. I remember some of them because they were unique in one way or another. We did, for example, a survey of, I believe, the last farm that was purchased by the Cook County Forest Preserve, which is really good. Instead of selling it to developers, they were able to sell it to the Cook County Forest Preserve. More recent surveys, we did a couple surveys for cannabis growing industry. Signed some non-disclosure agreement in regards to addresses and stuff. We did lots of surveys for wind turbines. It's south of the city, further south, like Kankakee County. But actually found lots of those old stones for the section corners in the fields, because nobody ever dug it to ruin them. Yes.
Yeah, but we were talking earlier, you were talking about some of your plaque books and stuff, and one of the books goes back to 1818?
Yes.
Yeah. So I just, for everybody, it's very interesting to go by the table and see all those things.
Yes.
Be expecting the survey business to get picked up, because aging infrastructure's got to get fixed, and there's got to be a lot of work coming down the line. And
economy is recovering and our business is recovering. In 2008, 2009, it was really bad. We had to lay off so many people and close to.
I'm an engineer, engineering is a tedious detail. I guess everybody wants to Google it.
No, we had civil engineering department, and we were doing, before this recession, we were doing like 12, 14 new subdivisions a year, like 1,000 homes a year.
I'm primarily a boundary line surveyor, not construction. So I've always stayed away from heavy construction, because if you ever stood on the side of a road for any length of time, it's very frustrating. And try to think while you're working and listen to that traffic. I leave that to what we call the technicians.
And also it's dangerous. Just like construction workers sometimes get killed that standing on construction site on highways or roads. 2 years ago in Indiana, a young surveyor was killed and 2 little kids. It's just terrible. Donald is licensed both in Illinois and Indiana, so we are members of both societies and get newsletters and actually send a check to that family. They had fundraising. It just, it's difficult. It's a difficult job. You have to really like it. We work year around. We work when it's really hot. We work when it's really cold. As I said, we only don't work when it's raining or snowing. And as crazy as it sounds, we don't work when it's raining or snowing, not to protect people, because you can wear a raincoat and rain boots, to protect that electronic equipment. It's like spilling coffee on your laptop. It will be ruined, and equipment is quite expensive. First GPS units, when they just for surveying, when they just came on market, were $70,000. Now it's less expensive, but still it's in tenth of thousands of dollars. So we are really careful with equipment. Since economy started recovering, I would say last 2-3 years, some of our big clients, land developers who were sitting on the land that they purchased before this crash, they started asking if we can do, like, instead of 60 homes or 100 homes subdivision, can you just do like 15? We want to test the market. So last couple years we did, we did like 10 or 12 subdivisions in the last 3 years in different areas. One of the unique projects that we did I don't know if you know or not, there are subdivisions in US where every owner owns a little airplane and they have a hangar and taxi and strip in the subdivision. So that's like a requirement for every owner. Don did one subdivision like that. It's southwest near Lemont, I believe. I actually volunteered to go there and do a survey because I wanted to see it. This is unique. Like, he told me, we're going to field tomorrow. I said, why? Send the guys. No, you are going with me, we're going to field. Why? When we will get there, you will see. We went there, and it's Frank Lloyd Wright building that we need to do a survey that his father did original survey like in 1946. And then people finally were selling it, so we needed to go and update it. Beautiful building. I like historical buildings because they all look different. New subdivisions, I am sorry to say, now maybe developer has like 3 or 5 different plans. So it's like you are driving on the street. If you are driving in the dark and a little bit drunk, how can you find your house, you know? Because lots of homes look the same, you know. Even in the daytime, sometimes, if you are daydreaming, it's hard to find it unless you see your curtains and they are different from your neighbor's curtains. In regards to the land surveying and property ownership, one of the things that I wanted to tell you, I grew up in Ukraine, which was part of the Soviet Union, and now it's independent country. We did not have private ownership of the land. So the government owned the land. We had like a lifetime lease. So like my father got the lease. I don't know how much he paid. He built a house. Then when he passed away, my mother transferred it into her name. And then when she passed away, me and my sister, we transferred it in our names, and then we sold it. We sold the house, and lease was transferred somehow as well. So when I came to America, and when I got involved with land surveying, we got married. I was here already for like a year and a half when we met and got married. And when I learned about land surveying, and I was shocked, honestly, I was really shocked. People are buying the most expensive purchase of their life. And I don't care if that person can afford only $60,000 house or $6 million house. They are buying the most expensive purchase of their life. And they either don't ask for a survey to be done by a reputable company, or they receive a plat at the closing and they never ask what this means. Do you want to know what you are buying? Do you think you know what you bought? No, just like gentleman said. Got the plat and went outside and was trying to figure out with his little measure tape where his boundary lines. So, you know, just my observation. Couple of interesting projects that we did, I have here written. In Barrington, one of our good clients, developer, he bought a piece of land from a tax sale because it kind of was landlocked. And landlocked means that there is no access to the road. This is acreage we're talking about, and all of the surrounding properties are acreage. So can you make a little sketch done for George's property? The problem was more legal than surveying because the next door owner gave this property previous owner easement for ingress and egress over his portion of the land, but part of that statement wasn't correct, was missing to connect to the road. And then when that owner passed away, the other owners started objecting, and this property became landlocked. So it goes like this. He'll make a sketch and then we'll explain in detail. And this is important because when people are buying the property, they should ask their attorney. I mean, most of the people do use attorney for closing. They should ask if there are any problems or potential problems and what the survey means. On the survey plat, we show not only the house and the boundary lines, but we put like dimensions. If there are fences, we put a note that fence is 2 inches north or south from the property line. So then you go home, you can look at the survey and see and understand. If there is no fences, we put what we call ties from the building to the property line on all sides. So then you can go home and stretch the ruler from the building wall, let's say 8 feet, so you know approximately it's here. Especially if the properties are rectangular, it's easier to have an idea where it is.
So this was the property Tanya was talking about here. It's bounded by a railroad, which he had an ancient access to cross the railroad, but the railroad negated it. So this showed up on a map, and he thought he could cross over to his property, so he bought it. The problem was there was an easement to get to this property across this property land over here, but it never reached his property. So he had to negotiate with this client, with that client, and this piece to get access to his property. The problem being, this was all townhomes. Individual owners of property within the development. He couldn't get approvals from all of the owners, so therefore he couldn't get easement to his property. So he's still landlocked and still trying to solve that problem. And I asked him, you didn't call me for the survey, did you? We would have shown him before he bought it that he did not have access. And this is a case where, you know, Barrington, it was only 18 acres? No, it was more.
No, it was like 27 acres.
27 acres. How much is the land in Barrington for 27 acres?
There's a big piece of land right here on Barrington Road, after Mariano, South Mariano's, which is owned by Menards. But they can't sell it because of that same reason. They can't act in a state allow them to go onto Barrington Road.
Yeah.
So it's
They have access, but they can't use it.
no.
Yeah, that's a different issue, yeah. Yeah. You can have a road down here, and say you're interested in buying this property, you can have a road down here, but the state may not approve a driveway.
That's the situation they're affected.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, did they get a survey?
Well, but now it's too cheap to do it, bro.
To get it before they bought it. Now I bet you they're getting a
They
survey.
have cornfields every year.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all they can do with the land.
One of my major clients was Jewel Foods before they were sold to American Industries. But they used to hire me and get a survey, complete topographic legal survey, before they even offered to buy the property. The only problem that was I had a hard time telling the client, the owner of the property, that my client might want to buy your property. And they would say, well, when he comes with an offer, otherwise get off. So,
They could do a survey then.
yeah. If an owner says to get off your property, we will get off your property. However, there is a state law that surveyors cannot be charged for trespassing. But more than once, I've looked down the wrong end of a 12 gauge, so. Yes?
When you're talking about each homeowner having their own land survey, it is amazing to me, the friends I've known over the years, that when they see, well, I don't know if that's my fence or somebody else's fence on the property, go, do you have a land survey?
Yeah.
And some say, oh, some say, yeah. And I says, that's who determines who owns that fence.
Wrong.
Well,
Surveyor will not tell you who owns what. If it's not in your deed, a surveyor is going to say, I have no idea. We can only state facts.
right.
Fence is so many feet over, so many,
Well, and it shows if you know, the land lot line, and you show the fence, which side of the land lot.
a survey will only show the fence and the property line where he deems it to be.
Right.
He's not going to say it's your fence or it's his.
No, not that sure, but the plot will show where the fence
Where the lot line is.
lot line is. It'll be
Yes,
there.
yes, it'll give a dimension from the fence to the lot line.
And that will determine who owns that fence.
No, the court determines that.
But they will most likely use a
The court will come in with, ask for a plat of survey to make their decision, but it's a court decision, not a survey decision.
No, I understand that. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, when you look at, you get your plot survey,
Yes,
it'll show if there's fences.
it should show.
Right. Well, some do, yeah. But
There's what's called a mortgage survey or I forget what it's called in Indiana because I don't do them. Mortgage or survey inspection. Survey inspection. That means that the house is on the right lot and it's within 1 foot of my dimension that I show you. Doesn't show fences, doesn't show anything else. You know what it's good for?
not much, huh?
Oh, yeah, my bit.
It's caused so many problems that the courts are busy, the lawyers love them. Yes?
The first house I bought, my garage encroached onto the next property by 2 inches, but it was been there for 40 years.
Is that the rule of adverse possession then?
Again, that's a court decision.
Yeah, when I did the survey, it showed my garage encroaching, but that's all, it just showed it.
Nobody.
Did he call it an encroachment? I doubt it.
Oh, no, that's what I call it.
Yeah.
It just showed my garage over the line.
Exactly. The surveyor shows in effect a statement of facts.
And nothing happened, huh?
It's up to,
Well,
it's
I
up.
don't know if my neighbor knew that my garage was on
Oh. Yeah.
for 40 years.
Yeah, you don't want to go on.
No. My neighbor, there's 3 houses on our street, and none of us ever had fences. And it was wonderful. I mean, when the grass was cut, it looked like a park. And the kids would play, ball and whatever across all the lots. It didn't matter to any of us. Well, there's a new neighbor now on our street, and he got a dog, and so he had to put in a fence. So now we discovered that we have more grass to cut. I mean, because over the years, you generally think that it's along where there was a lilac bush or whatever,
Yeah.
and now I know that our yard is bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah. Many times I've asked the owners where they think the lot line is, and when I complete the survey, Nowhere near,
Yes.
nowhere near.
At least it's more, not less. So that's a good thing.
Farmers had an agreement with their next door neighbor. 1 year or 5 years, they'd have the path to the fields on one side of the fence, and then they'd shift over and have it on the other side of the fence. Because they're sharing property, I mean, you don't want to tear down the fence, so they have the roadway shifting. Too many surveyors use the roadway for the property line. I mean, I should say surveyors.
Does the state of Illinois require surveyors to be licensed?
Yes,
Okay. So somebody just can't say, hey, I'm a surveyor.
Oh,
yes. My own personal view is that as of like 1960, when they took the licensing away from the surveyors and gave it to the educators that never been out in the field a day, it took a big downturn, because you can get a license, complete the courses, but you don't have the knowledge. When I went through it, you had to be under the direct supervision of a surveyor for 7 years before you could even take the test. And then the test was created by surveyors, not educators.
Big difference.
Big difference. Now they get the license and then they learn.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Tell me.
in some professions, it's scarier than in others.
If you went through this, what they had in Europe with guilds, there was no handyman, you had to live with a carpenter for 10 years.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because we have these old records and land doesn't move, so like you can tear down your house, but your property corners where they were established whatever years ago. And because of Donald's personal extensive experience, we, in the last 3-4 years, we decided we're not going to chase every single family home survey. We will do conflicts, litigation, and like commercial, industrial properties. Lots of commercial and industrial property owners, like apartment buildings, call us if we ever did a survey before. So we decided to do something with these archives. We're cataloging it, organizing, looking in drawings, and trying to scan some stuff that we can. We will have to photograph a lot. But I said about litigation and conflicts, most of the conflicts don't go to court. What is it, mitigation or not mitigation? Mediation, sorry, just mediation. So you don't find court cases, but there are some interesting cases that we were involved with. For example, the famous choke cherry tree. There is a far south suburb called Olympia Fields, and it's a really nice suburb. They held one of the US Open golf tournaments there, and Tiger Woods was involved in that. So it's a really nice suburb. And after one of the storms, if this is 2 properties, then there was a tree, and they really didn't know which tree, so it fell on this property. Not the entire tree, but like big branch, and it was still hanging by few strands. Nevertheless, this guy got his chainsaw and he went and cut that branch. The other guy is running, "You are cutting my tree!" So the guilty person called us and asked us to survey his property. And they lived in that house for 28 years, so they don't even remember if they got the survey when they bought the property. And he asked us to stake that property line like every 10 feet so they can put the fence. We went and measured the entire block, calculated, went second time, staked the property line, and the property line goes right through the center of that tree. But how I see it, like, okay, this is a choke cherry tree, so it's a garbage tree. It's not, oak or pecan or anything. It grew on its own. And it was that owner's responsibility to cut that branch. But this guy cut it, so instead of coming to him and saying, thank you, you saved me $10, then this conflict. This is crazy. Or right now we are working on a case, actually our really good lawn friends. They want to sell the house, and they realize that retaining wall between the two properties, that they thought actually that retaining wall belongs to the other neighbors. But they wanted to make sure, because that retaining wall was built of those railroad wood, that huge things. And over the years it deteriorated, so it started sliding into their driveway. So they asked us to do the survey, and again, they lived in that house for so many years. We went and did the survey. We found the original survey for this neighbor's property that Earl Smith did when the subdivision was created. I think it was like 1942 or something. And it clearly shows a stone retaining wall on the neighbor's property, and now it's a wood retaining wall. So we went. Even the block is not rectangular. It's all curvy streets, and it looks crazy shape, and the lots are not rectangular. So we had to measure entire block. We had to try to find some old stakes on properties, and looks like majority of that retaining wall is on the neighbor's property, but in two places, about 2-3 inches, it slid into this property. And they are now fighting with these neighbors for 6 months, cannot make them replace it. Village got involved, and they called again a couple days ago. And I said, listen, you have only one choice. You need to file a lawsuit. Maybe after that, the neighbors will fix it. But conflicts arise. You can live with your neighbors forever and be on good terms. But if you need, to plant a tree or cut the tree, or like tree died or fell during the storm, then argument starts, who has to pay for it? It's always the money.
Tanya, when we talked about the size of a township, it's 36 square miles?
Supposed to be.
But that's my question. Schaumburg Township is not that size. Why?
We have a map, and Don, do you want to explain?
What makes ours different?
It's not only yours. It's not only yours, but he will explain.
Okay, it's down here Centralia, right? Here's where we are. 41 North.
Yes.
I mentioned that they would set points every 6 miles, right? What happens when you get so many sections up? They would put another township line. After you get up to the 6 sections, you put another township line. And here's what happened. You got up to here, and there wasn't a mile left. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but not 6. So they had to keep this line because that was dependent upon this township up here. So this actually line was like that. In some townships, there is no section 1 at all. So if you find a legal and somebody wants you to sell some property in section 1, I forget what it is, 42? Take a look. Section 1, 4212, I think it is. There is no section 1. So you could get a quick claim for the entire section 1 and you bought nothing. Does that answer it?
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of.
Sort of. I just know that we're short. We're short on that. It's 36 something. Yes.
Township 41, right here, we have 2 pages. You can come after we will finish and see. In one, it goes from bigger to smaller, and in another township, it just ends like in the center. It's a government correction line, they call it.
So did they start from Centralia?
Yes,
And then did they move in an orderly fashion?
every 6 miles.
As orderly as they could.
Now, was that, there was more than one crew or just one crew?
Done. How many crews of governmental surveyors
Or
were
just how many,
dividing?
more than one?
There were more than one crew, yes,
So they might
Yes.
be at different places at the same time.
but not for the same reason. They were there to do other things. One crew was really just the township line. One crew was just the range lines.
Okay. Yeah, so that's why you might not come out right yet.
Well, going across swamps, rivers, yeah.
And if I remember correctly, I think the original governmental surveyors were coming from the east and from the west, done. And then they were supposed to meet someplace. And in some places they didn't meet by far. And in some places they met more or less okay, which is again wonderful considering all of the circumstances. So there are some lines that called governmental correction lines that surveyors are aware or should be aware.
The range lines were pretty good because of Polaris. Even during the day, what they did, they would at night have a point and then shoot Polaris and then set a point in the darkness on line, so that when they woke up in the morning, they could run a straight line with the compass. So the range lines were pretty good. Township lines is a whole different matter. Don't forget, the earth is a globe, and you got converging lines. So it took spherical geometry, mathematics, out in the field, longhand, and yes, there were problems. They would converge, and this range line might be up here, and that's what's called a government jog. From this would be, we're in 11. This is 10 east, this is 11 east, but this is 10 east, and this is 11 east. Yeah. That's where you get the roads going so many feet over to the one side or the other. But this is basically because of trying to meet, the rules were to meet this line and this line. And the excess or minimum would be in the last tier of 6 sections. That didn't even work all the time, because a lot of times it was 2 sections that got cut. There are some maps, I'll try to point it out and show it to you for better understanding. Yes?
How about other countries, the United States, the way they're laid out? Are other countries similar, or how did they go about doing that?
This was only Jefferson. Most other countries are to a stone hedge, oak tree, or whatever, like the eastern side of the country is. Deeds and barrens and distances. And what's interesting is, okay, and the interesting thing is that they didn't use Polaris. They just made an assigned north. So your bearings are off 10 degrees sometimes. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it like they do some road repairs. They fix it or repave it. And then I see like the next year I see surveyors out there with the little wheels, like they're thinking like the sidewalk moved or something. What are they just remeasuring things or?
Those are probably paving contractors trying to get paid.
No. I'm thinking like, you should have measured the first time.
Calculating quantities, probably. Surveyors don't use wheels, at least we don't.
But then again, I do see some surveyor guys like out the median, with their instrument or like measuring stuff. And I'm thinking like, why are they doing it again? I mean, it's not, the road's done. You think that?
Police disguises their radars on the orange tripods with a kind of similar, like people don't know exactly how that instrument has to look, especially because there are different instruments. So we actually heard them in use. The police disguises, so they might be just looking for speeders. Be aware. Yeah.
Since Jefferson wasn't around, who picked St. Greeley, Illinois?
No, I believe Jefferson was
He was
around.
alive then?
I believe so. I don't know if Centralia was there, but the distance is based upon a longitude. It's,
Yeah, I understand.
yeah, it might be coincidence that it's Centralia, but it's by longitude.
Surveying is an interesting profession. You just need to like it and know lots of mathematics.
I want to point out, we got a very bad projector here, but these little dots that you see, what this is an exhibit for the depth of Lake Michigan and showing the change of the bottom based upon previous surveys. So this was an exhibit that Lincoln used. And the angle and distance was to keep the ship in the right spot so that they knew that they were taking the sounding or the bottom of the lake at the same point. So that's what the star image looks like. This is more or less where the instrument was set up. And then they turn an angle and keep the boat on line. So that's a very interesting. And they used points, building corners, and things that they could visually see for references, like we were talking about with the deep tunnel. You got to know where you are on land. And then there's triangulation from there. Trig.
I'm sorry, I forgot to say that part of these lawsuits came up because the river was reversed. I don't know if you know or not that Chicago River was reversed. The flow of Chicago River was reversed. So that and construction of Navy Pier, so it created some new land by accretion and it eliminated some old land that was there before.
basic principle that all of these little dotted areas, that was accretion. And Illinois Central said that that's their land. And the owner of the property said, no, it's my land. And that's what the lawsuit was basically about. In a nutshell, I should say.
So did the aide settle the lawsuit by presidential decree?
No. This is when he was an attorney, before he was president.
So all the new land in Hawaii with the volcano, that belongs to the government right away and.
That's a very interesting question because by U.S. laws, the accretion would be to the landowner that's adjacent to it. But it's also a court decision.
Hawaii is illegal.
But
Because you don't buy land there, you only lease it for 99 years in Hawaii.
in Hawaii, yeah. But there is a owner someplace.
Hawaiians.
Yeah, the Hawaiian, yeah.
Yeah, the little islands are owned only by the original, the native
Tribes, yeah. So that's why I say it's going to be an interesting question, what happens there.
This is a good time for us to end. It has been so interesting. I hope you agree that we learned so much today. Thank you, Don and Tanya, for a wonderful program. Thank you very much. One last thing that I would like to say, how I met Tanya. You know, I have been working on trying to find out who built the little Lion Bridge and hope to get it on the National Register. Well, Tanya and I talked. I learned about the fact that she may have the notebooks from Harry L. Emerson, who built our little Lion Bridge. But Tanya has boxes and cabinets, as she said, with so many documents in it that need to be cataloged and organized. So she has not been able to find any of his notes, but we're hoping.
And we have wedding on October 12th of our youngest child, so sorry, life is so
Life has gotten very
I will
busy.
start breathing after that, and then we can do some research.
I would like to invite you all to have a piece of birthday cake. It's our 59th birthday tomorrow. And so we have cake and there's coffee and there's some water there. So please come over to the table. We're going to cut that cake. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
We're going to sing. You want to sing happy birthday? You can sing happy birthday.